In the small, fog-enshrouded town of Graystone Hollow, nestled deep within the woods of New England, there was an old house at the edge of town, abandoned for decades, but not forgotten. The locals referred to it simply as the Whistler's House, named after the eerie sound that had once haunted the area. In the late 1800s, before it was abandoned, the house had belonged to a man named Elijah Carr. He was a quiet man, a hermit, who lived far from the town's center. Elijah was known for his skill as a woodworker, but even more so for his unsettling ability to carve lifelike figures that seemed almost too real. He rarely spoke to anyone and was often seen late at night, walking the woods with a lantern, a strange, distant whistling emanating from his lips. It was said that Elijah had a daughter, Amelia, a beautiful young woman with a bright smile and an infectious laugh. The two lived together in the house, but it was clear that something was not quite right about their relationship. Townsfolk spoke in hushed whispers about the odd way Elijah looked at Amelia, his obsessive gaze lingering too long, his touch too soft. No one knew for sure, but rumors of dark secrets began to spread. One cold October evening, Amelia vanished without a trace. The only clue left behind was a single, perfect carving of a young woman, her eyes eerily lifelike, holding a lantern in one hand. Her face, though beautiful, wore a tragic expression. Some said it resembled Amelia. The town searched for days, but there was no sign of her. Elijah, devastated and frantic, claimed that she had gone into the woods and never returned. But something in his eyes told another story, a hollow, frantic look that spoke of guilt and loss. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, the whistling began. It started faintly at first, like a soft breeze through the trees, but as the days turned colder, the sound grew louder, more distinct. It was the same eerie tune Elijah had been known to hum during his walks. People began to notice that the sound came from the woods around Graystone Hollow, near the old house. And at night, when the fog rolled in thick, those who dared venture close to the house could hear the unmistakable sound of whistling in the distance, always coming from the direction of the woods, but never close enough to pinpoint. Some claimed to have seen figures in the window of the house, shadowy, indistinct forms moving behind the cracked glass. Others said they had glimpsed a tall, thin man standing in the yard, his back turned with a lantern in hand, whistling the same tune over and over. No one ever dared approach. Years went by, and the house was forgotten by most, except for the old-timers who still remembered the strange events that had unfolded there. The town eventually built a road around the property, and the house fell deeper into disrepair. But the whistling continued. It became a part of Graystone Hollow's lore, an eerie sound that seemed to drift in on the wind at night. Then, one winter, a young man named Sam Miller, an outsider who had recently moved to town, decided he would solve the mystery. He'd heard the stories, of course, but didn't believe in the supernatural. He was determined to prove the whistling was nothing more than wind through the trees or the sound of animals in the woods. He went to the house one evening, armed with only a flashlight and his skepticism. As the sun set and the fog began to roll in, Sam stood in front of the old house. The moment he stepped onto the creaking porch, the whistling started, soft at first, like the wind. But as Sam moved closer to the door, the whistling grew louder and more distinct until it was as though someone was standing right behind him, humming a mournful tune. His heart raced. He turned, but there was no one there. His flashlight flickered. Sam hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the house. The door creaked open on its own, as if inviting him in. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and the smell of decay. He took a deep breath and ventured further inside. As he moved through the darkened hallway, Sam's flashlight illuminated strange carvings on the walls. Figures of men and women, all with hollow eyes. Then he saw it, a figure standing at the far end of the hallway, illuminated only by the faint glow of his flashlight. It was Elijah Carr, or at least a figure that looked like him, tall, thin, with a lantern in his hand. He was facing away from Sam, staring out the broken window. The whistling continued, the same eerie tune. "Elijah?" Sam called, his voice shaking. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it slowly turned its head, revealing an unnerving smile, a smile that stretched impossibly wide. Sam's heart dropped into his stomach as the face morphed, no longer a man's, but the face of a young woman, Amelia, or something that once resembled her. The whistling stopped. Before Sam could move, a cold hand touched his shoulder. He spun around, but there was nothing there. The house felt suffocating, alive with the echoes of something unspoken, something that had never left. With his breath coming in ragged gasps, Sam turned and bolted from the house. He didn't stop until he reached the town, and he never spoke of what he saw again. The whistling stopped that night, but only for a time. To this day, the people of Graystone Hollow still hear the faint tune of the whistler on cold nights, when the fog is thick and the moon is high. They say it's not the wind, it's Elijah, or perhaps Amelia, or something in between. And no one dares to enter the house at the end of Graystone Hollow.